Right bracket Chapter 13. The honorable laws of the land. We believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates, in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law. 12th Article of Faith. In Thompson, near Kirtland, Ohio, some of the Latter-day Saints attempted to organize themselves into a united order. But, before a full organization could be completed, according to the principles of consecration, some of the wealthy members backed out. They turned to the Gentile civil courts and sued the church. This was a serious blow to the establishment of the United Order in its earliest attempt, because they won the case, causing the collapse of the order. The saints learned from this early lesson that it was necessary to organize, purchase land, and deed properties, according to the laws of the land, otherwise, the Gentiles and the apostates would have power to destroy and rob them of their property. This rule of obeying the law of the land in temporal affairs was also confirmed by the Lord, who said, "Organize yourselves according to the laws of man, that your enemies may not have power over you." D&C 44:4-5. Right bracket And again, let no man break the laws of the land, for he that keepeth the laws of God hath no need to break the laws of the land. D&C 58:21. It was evident that the saints could, according to the laws of the land, acquire the land they needed, gain titles and deeds, and organize themselves into a united order. Furthermore, by doing so, they would be under the protection of those laws from enemies or apostates, who might create trouble for them. The Lord made it clear that he had been instrumental in the establishment of the U.S. Constitution for this very purpose. C. D&C 98:5-6. One of the main problems the saints had was the constant changing of laws by those in public office, who violated their oath of office. Many of these politicians made rules, regulations, and even laws which were against the Constitution. The prophet Joseph Smith was aware of this fickle nature of man, both in and out of public office, and said, "Laws and opinions, like the vanes on steeples, change with the wind. One Congress passes a law, another repeals it, and one statesman says that the Constitution means this, and another that, and who does not know that all may be wrong?" Powers and Policies of Government, pages 25-26. Devising a practical, equitable, and trouble-free united order system, according to the laws of the land, was a most exhaustive labor. Many systems and policies were tried. It seemed that lawyers and apostates were the major problems for those early saints. Brigham Young said, "I say to the Latter-day Saints that the only reason why we do not take up the subject and enter into the order of Enoch or a city of Enoch is simply because we have not been able to find every item of law bearing upon this matter, so as to organize in a way that apostates cannot trouble us. This is the only reason. This is a matter that I am paying particular attention to with some of my brethren. As soon as we can accomplish this, and get an instrument that lawyers cannot pick to pieces and destroy, we expect to get up this institution and enter most firmly into it." JD 16:122. The Lord gave many instructions to the saints pertaining to the purchasing of lands in Missouri. It was a very important item of their faith, and in some cases they were commanded to do it. Orson Pratt commented, "And lest the churches should be negligent and slothful upon this subject, the Lord told them that it was his will that the disciples should purchase the whole region of country, as soon as time would permit. Behold, here saith the Lord, is wisdom. Let them do this lest they receive none inheritance, save it be by the shedding of blood." It would appear from this, that unless the whole region should be purchased by the saints, they were to receive none inheritance there, and at the same time an intimation was given, that unless the saints were faithful and expeditious to do this, there would be a shedding of blood. The New Jerusalem, page 16. Right bracket The Lord explained these conditions and reasons. "Behold, the land of Zion I, the Lord, hold it in mine own hands, nevertheless I, the Lord, render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's. Wherefore, I the Lord will that ye should purchase the lands, that you may have advantage of the world, that you may have claim on the world, that they may not be stirred up unto anger." D&C 63:25-27. After the saints failed to obey these instructions, they were forced into the wilderness to make another attempt. Thousands of deeds were made to the church, but they were delayed for a time in order to obtain the form of a deed which should be legal, according to the laws of the territory. In 1854 these deeds were conveyed to Brigham Young, trustee in trust, and not to the presiding bishop of the church, which was departing from the letter of the Revelations, and from the practice in Jackson County, Missouri, 20 years earlier. Building the City of God, Arrington, Fox and May, page 69. The deeds were never transferred, for it seemed they wanted to make them binding within the limits of the law. The hostility of the federal territorial courts to any aspect of Mormon life departing from greater American norms loomed as a constant threat, making incorporation advisable as a protection against suits by apostates. Ibid. Page 203. Brian made a very clear statement regarding these laws of the land and the reasons that Mormons were trying to comply with them. We have to bow to the whims and caprices of the ignorant and to the prejudice of the willful ignorant sectarianism. We are under the necessity of getting up our constitution or the articles of our association so that they will agree with existing statutes and be legal, that we can carry on business as we wish without being infringed upon or molested by anybody. JD 17:157. However, it was only a few years later that trouble again came to the Mormon people regarding their property. This time the laws and constitution of the land were ruthlessly disregarded by the United States legislators. They passed the Poland Bill, which divested the Mormon-dominated probate courts of criminal jurisdiction, so any apostate could take a particular United Order group into the courts and collect as much as $20,000 in cash. An apostate brother named Copeland in Beaver sued his former order in the Gentile courts and received $10,000 settlement. From an editorial in the Evening and Morning Star to the elders stationed in Zion came the following advice in support of the laws of the land. We would advise in the first place that every disciple, if in his power, pay his just debts, so as to owe no man, and then if he has any property left, let him be careful of it, and he can help the poor by consecrating some for their inheritance. For as yet their has not been enough consecrated to plant the poor in inheritances, according to the regulation of the Church and the desire of the faithful. This might have been done had such as had property been prudent. It seems as though a notion was prevalent in Babylon that the Church of Christ was a common stock concern. This ought not so to be, for it is not the case. When a disciple comes to Zion for an inheritance, it is his duty, if he has anything to consecrate to the Lord, for the benefit of the poor and the needy, or to purchase lands, to consecrate it according to the law of the Lord, and also according to the law of the land, and the Lord has said that in keeping his law, we have no need to break the laws of the land. And we have abundant reason to be thankful that we are permitted to establish ourselves under the protection of a government that knows no exceptions to sect or society, but gives its citizens a privilege of worshipping God according to their own desire. United Order among the Mormons, Jedus, page 63. And then was added, but to suppose that we can come up here and take possession of this land by the shedding of blood would be setting at naught the law of the glorious gospel, and also the word of our great Redeemer, and to suppose that we can take possession of this country without making regular purchases of the same according to the laws of our nation would be reproaching this great republic, in which the most of us were born, and under whose auspices we all have protection. Ibid. Page 64. Christian laws and Gentile laws have always had conflicts, but the United Order was a principle that would suffer as much from within as it would from without. The laws of the land were serving a double purpose. The decision to organize the branches of the order under the territorial law of incorporation provoked regret, if not dissatisfaction, among those who longed for a system cemented by unselfishness and brotherly love. The legally corporate order controlled by stock voting, seemingly similar to the co-ops, stood in stark contrast to their expected family-type order, with all working for all, and no account kept in terms of money wages. The presidency answered that although all communities would eventually take that form, people were not yet ready for a perfect system, consequently, accepting the legally incorporated form meant a move toward the goal. In rare cases where the members were willing and eager to adopt the family pattern, it was advised that account should be kept by a credit and debit system of the contributions in goods and labor, and of the consumption of each individual. Thus, misunderstandings over supposed inequality and discrimination would be avoided. Building the City of God, Arrington, Fox and May, page 151. The more we study these statements about honoring the laws of the land, the more we learn that they apply to titles, land purchases, deeds, conveyances, abstracts, etc., but do not apply to doctrines or religious principles. Notice Brigham Young's advice. We are at liberty from this conference to go and build up a settlement, or we can join ourselves together in this city, do it legally according to the laws of the land, and enter into covenant with each other by a firm agreement that we will live as a family, that we will put our property into the hands of a committee of trustees, who shall dictate the affairs of this society. JD 16:8. It was at this point in history there came a major conflict between the laws of God and the laws of man. Obeying the laws of the land means that men should obey laws that pertain to the land, not to laws opposing religious principles or doctrines. This has always been a problem for prophets, patriarchs, apostles, and all the saints. The laws of the land were meant for the protection and the good of all, but those laws could not infringe on the inalienable rights or the common law of man. The laws of the land pertain to the land, but not to religion. But notice how a vicious law actually was used against the Mormons. As the destruction of the Brime City Cooperative Sawmill project at Marsh Valley, Idaho, illustrates, Mormons were subject to harsh, arbitrary applications of the law at the hands of hostile federal appointees. Right-bracket church leaders wanted to break with traditional economic and social usages, inaugurating a new, more just order, but were hindered by the knowledge that hostile judges were scrutinizing their every act, prepared to bring the full weight of the law to combat any activities contrary to accepted American practice. Building the City of God, Arrington, Fox and May, page 162. But the saints could not compromise if rules, regulations, laws or the whims of courts should contradict the laws of God. The Lord said that Zion cannot be built up unless it is by the principles of the law of the celestial kingdom, otherwise I cannot receive her unto myself. D&C 105:5. Neither did the saints need to worry about defending themselves or fighting to defend the laws of God. For he said, I will fight your battles. D&C 105:14. The people of the United States did not abide by the laws of their own constitution, for they confiscated the land of the Mormons, sanctioned the depredations of mobs, allowed the saints to be driven from state to state, and finally forced them into the wilderness territory. Even this was not enough, for they soon sent an army out to destroy them. Then they made direct laws against the rights and religion of the Mormons. The Latter-day Saints believed in honoring and sustaining the constitutional laws of the land, but the people of the United States didn't. President John Taylor said that there are certain principles that emanate from God, but we have to protect ourselves in carrying them out and make them conform, as near as we can, to the laws of the land. JD 17:178. But this did not mean sacrificing the laws of God to the laws of man. Jesus said that he would render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Matt. 22:21. It was again repeated in our dispensation. C.D&C 63:26. This indicates a definite distinction between church and state, or property and religion, or the temporal and the spiritual. Only dictators assume the right to make laws of the land that dictate man's religion. Religious freedom is supposed to be protected by the Constitution and by those men who take an oath to defend it. God does not expect man to give up his religion to the unrighteous demands of political tyrants. Governments cry for a separation of church and state, but it also applies that there must be a separation of state from church. Almost every government that ever existed has trampled on the rights of religious freedom. In the United States, both state and federal governments have made some of the most violent abuses against religious freedom. The separation of church and state must apply both ways. An important concept in Mormon theology is obedience to the laws of the land, but we cannot sustain and obey any unjust, immoral, unconstitutional or tyrannical law just because it is law. Neither should men submit to any form of unholy law opposing the law of God. We believe in honoring and sustaining the law if it is honorable and worthy of sustaining. We also claim and demand the privilege of worshipping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience, 11th Article of Faith, but not submitting to a law that demands us to act against our conscience. Laws are often created by biased and unwise men. It is not proper to meekly submit to statutes, rules and regulations that are unconstitutional just because it has become passed by some agency of government. Submission to unjust law is voluntary servitude. Men must defend their inalienable rights and make appeals to civil authority for any infraction of civil or religious liberties. See all of D&C 134. When any injustice, or denial of liberty, is enforced by government through some vicious or prejudicial law, the Lord instructs his people to appeal for a redress of their wrongs. Let them importune at the feet of the judge, and if he heed them not, let them importune at the feet of the governor, and if the governor heed them not, let them importune at the feet of the president, and if the president heed them not, then will the Lord arise and come forth out of his hiding place, and in this fury vex the nation. And in his hot displeasure, and in his fierce anger in his time, will cut off those wicked, unfaithful, and unjust stewards, and appoint them their portion among hypocrites and unbelievers, even in outer darkness, where there is weeping, and wailing, and gnashing of teeth. D&C 86:91. Religious liberty is more sacred than civil liberty, being a part of the inalienable rights of man. No man or set of men have the just power to deprive anyone of their sacred rights. Therefore, whatsoever God hath joined together, as marriage, united order, or whatever, let not man put asunder. Matt. 19:6. Certainly God will not honor a dishonorable law, nor does he expect any good man to obey an evil law.